welcome back, it's Barfly2 here. I'm back at work after summer break with the kids, and unfortunately me and Barfly2's rotas just aren't quite matching up yet to get the games I've promised finished. Bear with us though, we do have a lot planned, and obviously Rising Tensions will be coming out soon, so we are hoping to do a lot more. Today's episode's a little bit different. It's going to be a bit of an opinion piece, plus sharing a bit of the Barflies background with organised play. So as expected, the Barflies come from a background of tabletop wargaming, mostly X-Wing, some Armada in there, and some of the usual suspects from Games Workshop. Ali Barfly 1, he has a background with quite a few competitive play scenes with various miniature groups and card games, whereas myself, Barfly 2, I've actually got very little experience in the competitive scene and really roll into the narrative aspect of games. Both really love the aspect of gathering a group of miniatures, painting them up if possible, gathering all the component pieces, getting together and just rolling some dice. What does that actually mean for us for what we can expect for Star Trek Into the Unknown if the organised play scene is really going to build and develop? Well, I think the onus is all on us as players to really get out there and actually make organised play happen. Organised play is going to be based around incident missions and a match play setup, as described in the rulebooks as we have them. This means we'll be creating incident missions from our cards on a 3x3 table. You can expect to bring a pool of ships along with you in which you will to select once you've actually found out what your missions are. You'll have built your core pool of officers beforehand, probably for about the 50 point mark as it stands, and you'll also have a transfer pool selected already. Once you meet up with your opponent, you'll draw your overture and your situation and your 2 complication cards, then you'll secretly choose 1 complication each, which will not be revealed till later. Alternatively, it's also possible that the event itself will issue out the overtures, situations and complications. Once the mission is decided, you'll then use the fleet rules to assemble your fleet together and set up the table and actually play your game. Due to the length of games, you're probably only going to manage 2 to 3 games in a day, so a tournament will be about 2 to 3 games unless you're holding it over several days or actually doing the tournament format as a league. And we'd expect your tournament to probably follow the normal standard Swiss style structure. Now, we've not seen many Star Trek Into the Unknown tournaments out there so far. I've actually only really seen one on Tabletop Simulator earlier on this year, and I'd just like to really quickly go over what we did there, just to really go through what a tournament could look like. Just really want to thank Biggs on the Discord server there for actually setting up that tournament and designing some of the scoring system from that, which I believe has now been tweaked slightly, and I'll show that just in a second. Also want to thank everybody that actually took part in that tournament. All the guys there are great, and I've had a lot of good conversations with them in the time since then. The Discord server is really, really good, and I do urge anybody listening to be a part of that. A really good community out there. The tournament was played over Tabletop Simulator, which meant people from around the world could play. It's a virtual simulation of the game. If you've not tried it, please give it a go. Get out there, ask a few people on Discord if they want a game, and start rolling some dice. So, cards on table. This was my first ever full tournament. I'm not a competitive player, I'll leave that to Barfly 1, that's his job. My job is to play games I love, and Star Trek Into the Unknown is one of those. I really just wanted to be involved in order to get some extra games under my belt. Biggs modelled it up on the Star Wars Armada Vassal World Cup that he's run before, and I'd say it worked really, really well. It's basically based on an initial pod phase where 4 players were playing 3 games against everyone else in their pod, and you had to qualify by passing a score to get into the Swiss rounds. There was 4 players in each pod. Once you got qualified through and into the Swiss, you had another 3 games that were set up. Biggs had already set up what each overture and situation would be, and the complications were drawn at random when you met each other online. So in effect, if you qualified, you were playing 6 games over the course of the tournament. As I expected, not being the most competitive players, I didn't perform very well in the tournament, but I did have a great time doing it, even though I was quite sleep deprived during it, because I seemed to be one of only 2 players that were in the European continent against the whole American continent. Next time, more sleep needed. Time zones notwithstanding, it was great fun, and I learned a lot from playing a lot of the other players. Each game we learned something new. As you'll have seen from the campaign system, scoring's different in Star Trek compared to, say, Armada or X-Wing, because you've got minor victories, major victories and stalemates, as well as the potential for mutual loss and avoiding mutual loss. The beauty of the system and scoring that Biggs has created here is it actually rewards you for avoiding a mutual loss. It's designed to actually help you decide to work together to avoid that mutual loss and penalise you if you decide to crash the game and go for a mutual loss. And thinking of everything, Biggs also designed points for surrendering and if you're unable to schedule a match, to basically ensure that the tournament or league keeps flowing. And this is probably the easiest way to run tournaments, I would say, as it's really like a tweaking of the campaign system scoring to take into account a more competitive nature. What would we like to see? Well, this is where Barfly 1 and Barfly 2 actually disagreed, and I'll go through what we disagreed on here. So what we agreed on was we both actually liked the strategic faction goals that were part of the campaign. So Barfly 1 and myself wanted to actually incorporate that into the World Cup style tournament situation. So the idea would be to develop the strategic goals for each faction and actually use them as an almost bingo cell system, that each player has goals that they can tick off as they play through the missions and get extra points for playing like their faction plays as you progress through the tournament using that World Cup scoring system. Really liked the concept that the designers have built in of furthering the faction's goals and actually ticking these strategic goals off as you go on and getting rewarding for that, whether you win or lose. As normal, this is where me and Barfly 1 had a slight disagreement, and I rolled into an even more narrative aspect for my idea. And this is where it becomes probably the most controversial, especially for those competitive players out there. But since it's a narrative game with different warring factions, I think for a narrative tournament we could go further. So I like the idea of some events being more faction based. Basically, players would score normally and then look at their faction goals as we've just described. But your teammates are going to influence your score. Basically, I like the idea of getting everybody's strategic goals, pooling them together by faction, and then dividing it by the number of people in the tournament. And then that bonus is applied to each player of that faction's score. Basically, this is the tide of the war or the political battles moving and shifting as the tournament progresses, and it influences every player's score. Basically, the idea of team play, but across the whole narrative event. Not looked at the actual scoring of what these points might be at the moment, and we might just use the ones that are in the strategic goals already, but it's certainly something we want to look at. Obviously that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and it won't be right for every single event. That's where me and Barfly 1 come together. We like the idea that Biggs used in the Tabletop Simulator tournament, great scoring system. We also like the idea of bringing in more narrative aspects with the strategic goals. but also for special narrative events, I think there's lots of potential there. But the big drawback against all these ideas that we've had is paperwork. Yep, players and tournament organisers would have to do a lot more counting and record keeping. But I think it's got potential, especially for a larger campaign or league-based system. There's nothing really new there, it's just taking ideas that are already around and actually already in the game. But we quite like them. What do you think? We'll see you next time. Thanks, bye.